This podcast is dedicated to sharing the practice of meditation, the philosophy of Western Buddhism, and the refuge and love of our TBC Sangha. Offering solutions that are simple, practical, and true. We believe happiness and better health are available to all people and for all people. We are here each week to lend wisdom and support to all who are making or considering making this journey. This is On the Range. Hello and welcome to episode number 5 of On the Range. I'm your host, Whit, and I am glad to be here. On the Range is dedicated to sharing Western Buddhism, meditation, and the power of Sangha with all interested people. Our goal is to make these tools and philosophies more accessible and to help folks lead happier and healthier lives. Joining us once again is Jordan colleague. She brings wisdom and compassion and keeps this offering from going too far off the tracks. Welcome back, Jordan. How are you?
Whit, we made it till episode 5. It's very exciting.
Yeah, it's a big milestone for us, and it's already been fraught with danger, but we're going to give it a whirl. So, how have you been? What have you been doing?
Well, I'm in a perfect place for danger. I just came off of a retreat at the Light Center in Baldwin City, Kansas. So it's not too far away, and it's a permaculture-based farm and nonprofit. They have communal potlucks and meditation, and I stayed in the Red Tail Yurt with Chris and the baby, and it was just an excellent place, about not too far out of the city, where I recommend anyone to visit. It's real easy to make reservations at.
What did the baby think of spending time as a unit in a yurt?
He loved it. Normally Chris and I kind of rough it out, with tent camping. And so this was a huge glamorous step up for us in the yurt.
That sounds great. I think it's fantastic that you guys take the time to do those kind of trips. The power of nature is so refreshing. It's so re-energizing. But to do it as a unit, to make that just part of who you guys are, is commendable, and it's also commendable to be doing that with a child of that. What is 6 months now? Is that?
Yeah, he just turned 7 months actually.
Okay.
So we're trucking along.
Yeah. So to go camping can be a challenge anyway. Camping with a baby, and again, though, in all honesty, incorporating the family unit with your spirituality, I think is so not just brave, but it's just wise. Just to make that part of who we are and how we do things. So, sounds like it was a great trip, and I'm a little bit jealous. I've not stayed in a yurt before, so I'll put that on the bucket list. I wanted to talk just a little bit about. We both attend Temple Buddhist Center here in Kansas City. That is our Sangha TBC. And as part of the presentation every week, there's a Dharma talk. It came up that for this talk, Mr. Robert Brumet, who is a tremendous teacher, wanted to talk a little bit about shame. The name of his talk is Ain't It a Shame? And it can be found on the Temple Buddhist YouTube page. If you would like to watch it, I highly recommend it. Before we get too far into the talk and what shame is and how it affects people, tell me a little bit about your relationship with Robert.
Ooh, my relationship with Robert has just evolved into such a fantastic thing. So it doesn't matter when I haven't seen him for a while or I see him regularly after service. Sometimes we'll all go to lunch together, and it's an open invitation. So if after service you want to go across the street and sit with Victor or Robert or some people who it's a pretty good time. So I often visit with him there. I've seen him in retreats. I attend those. And my relationship with Robert is patient. He doesn't mind if I ask him those hard-hitting questions. I think in the beginning when I first started meditating, I was looking for some kind of sobering psychedelic experience. And so I would ask him just all these outlandish questions, and he would entertain me. And, as I, grew spiritually and kind of softened in my practice, a lot of those questions, I could realize I was just trying to entertain myself. And, Robert's a charcuterie of information. He really can touch and talk about almost any topic. I mean, ranging from philosophy to fishing. So, you don't even really have to, speak about, things even at service if you don't want to. He's an excellent person to check in with. He's an author. I've read his books. Sometimes you can find them on the cart at service, the lending library, and you can pick it up and thumb it through. And he's an excellent just person to just reverb your life, and he'll listen to any manner. And I encourage people to go up to him after service. I'm not gatekeeping some friendship I have with Robert. I think he's a friendly individual and will absolutely talk with you if you want to stick around and go say hi.
His wisdom is apparent when you listen to him, but what is even more amazing with him is just the kindness that he radiates. He's accessible. You can't really put him off. I've watched him deal with people after he gives a talk or at a retreat, and he has that ability to connect with anyone at any moment. He's always present. He has such a long history of walking a very unique spiritual path that I just find, like I said, the kindness and when you watch him, coupled with the wisdom and the way he is so accessible and willing to share, you just want to be like him, is what I've kind of found. You want to live like him. He passes through the world very lightly, and yet he's so solid when you deal with him in a most positive way. So he has a website. It's robertbrumet.com. You can go there, learn more about him. If you're not in the Kansas City area, you can certainly find his books online. You can follow his blog. You can go to, as I mentioned earlier, the TBC YouTube page and watch his Dharma talks. Also, there's some from Victor Doherty, who's the director of TBC, and a few other people. But great place to go if you want to learn more about Buddhism, about meditation, about TBC, or having a sangha. On one of our earlier episodes, you used a term that was both fitting and clever, and it fits very well as title and theme for episode number 5. So tonight, we offer up for your consideration, Winning the Shame Game. Shame game was the term you used, and I can't remember the context. I just remember that when you said it, I thought, we got to work that back in, because it's easy to say, and it really wraps up kind of what a person's relationship with shame is, in that it's always kind of a game. It's really a game. I don't know that you win. It's probably a best that you don't play, but really the key is just being aware that it's going on. So we're going to discuss shame. We're going to talk about what it is and how it affects so many people, what you can do to better manage this learned emotion. And again, we're going to lean heavily on a recent Dharma talk that Robert Brumet gave. And our goal is just to shed some light and some wisdom on how to deal with what Robert referred to as an American epidemic. So I liked his definition that both shame and guilt are learned emotions. You become socialized and you learn those. And that guilt is the feeling that you've done something bad, and shame is believing that you are bad. So do you have a few examples of shame that might maybe make this more clear?
Yeah. So, shame shows up in our lives in so many different ways. And the cool part is that Buddhism offers a different way of holding it. And, I will say a little tidbit that it's kind of an awesome way to get stuck. So I don't want to make it a doom and gloom kind of topic. But, there is a lot of shame that kind of goes uncharted. Maybe we aren't aware of it, So I kind of put together some quick examples that might resonate with you as a listener, so you can kind of start to identify it if you have shame going on in your life. So I'm going to quickly breeze through my list, and I will say, it's completely normal that everyone experiences shame. So even if I, highlight something for you, we're going to kind of talk about it and offer some solution. But, so body related shame, that's a super quick one. People judge their bodies. I parenting shame, comparing yourself to other parents, or if your kids are good or bad, relationship shame, feeling unlovable. That's, very frustrating. That can stem easily from relationships. Maybe you have work shame where you're thinking negatively of yourself after making a mistake at work, or maybe you're hiding accomplishments because you don't feel like you deserve recognition. Maybe past choices have made you feel shameful. Maybe you were haunted by an addiction or mistakes, and then believing that they define you. That's a that's a big one. And then lastly, spiritual shame, where you're feeling unworthy of love or forgiveness or even belonging in maybe our spiritual community or one that you find fitting. And then believing that you're failing at being mindful or compassionate or even devoted. I think that one is so important too. Circling back to, we're kind of talking about these topics spiritually, is that it's so important that you don't start to, maybe you miss a service, or you miss a meditation session, or you don't keep up to the standards or whatever you're putting yourself in. It's really important that we don't box ourselves in with that kind of shame attitude. It absolutely, shame grows in the dark, and the first step is noticing it. So that was why I felt like it was important to kind of put together a quick list with.
Well, I appreciate that. And, as you were talking, it dawned on me that the shame that we develop for any of those reasons you just named, let's use, for example, maybe a shame tied to an addiction. As you work to heal or overcome that addiction, I think that, and I'm not sure it's true for every thing that you might be ashamed of, but it seems like the shame is the last thing that you heal. It's the last thing that goes away. So even as you quit, abusing a drug, for example, and you start to get healthy and you start to get your priorities better, whatever that means, I think the last thing that will heal is just that shameful feeling that it ever happened. And I'm pretty sure that it's probably true with anything else that you feel shame about. This is a brand new thought for me, which probably speaks to how slow I am, that it hadn't done on me before. But as you were speaking, I thought that was really interesting, that the shame seems to be the hardest thing. It almost is wispy like a fog around the problem or the smoke from the fire, but it just lingers. And when it flares up, those feelings come up again. And you just think, man, how could I have done that? Or how could I have been that way? And I was just curious, do you feel that way as well about the shame?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, shame isolates us, and it feeds self-judgment, and it keeps us trapped ultimately. I don't like to damn it, because I think it's a crucial part to integrate, into our self-growth. But I want to, rework it almost as if it's a visitor in our mind and not, who we are as a core. I like to encourage like holding it with gentleness, and not, you talked about it as this ethereal thing. And it is in a sense, because it does linger, especially around those choices or whatever we make. But it's important to remember that we aren't our choices. That's really why I love Buddhism, is because it's reframing it with like a spiritual truth, that Buddhism teaches us that at our core, we are not our mistakes, and we are the awareness itself.
So that's very well said, and it brings me to one of the core beliefs that I've developed from practicing, is that there are no mistakes. That it's just there's too many variables to go into what happened, and really the reality is that no matter what we're talking about, it's always something that's happened in your past, or almost always, and whoever you were then, that's just the decision you made. And no matter how it looks now, that was the best decision that you at that time could make. So let me put you on the spot. Do you find that true? Would you say that's true for you, that there are no mistakes?
Yeah, I personally have made so many mistakes in my life, and um, I've had to eradicate shame or, confront it multiple times. But I feel like a stronger individual and a more concreted individual because of the things that I've done and grown from. I remember when I was little and in math class thinking that, I was afraid to raise my hand and stop the teacher, when I didn't grasp something, and, feeling stupid around math and numbers kind of carried on to my like school later on. And I didn't even really realize it. So it doesn't have to be super monumental, huge things. You can look in like, the little parts of yourself where shame, carries. And, later on, I ended up having to take a math class, and I kind of noticed how shameful I was. So I was proactive. I would suggest that as well, as being proactive to kind of say it out loud. Shame thrives in silence. So you have to name it, and that loosens its grip. So when I said I feel shame about this, I'm really kind of calling it, forward, and I can, and that's where that noticing becomes such a muscle memory. So you can grow that awareness around those parts of you that, when we're asleep per se, we just don't notice. So maybe we're lashing out at someone when they ask me what 6 times 6 is or something. I don't know, but
There'll be no math on this episode, Jordan.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. I'm wetting in my boots.
So, and again, I believe there are no mistakes, and that's just that's what I've kind of gained from this practice. But having said that, and just from this conversation, again, the shame, even when I can look back on something and understand that, hey, that's not a mistake, that was just something to learn from, the shame is still the last thing. It's almost like if I stay there with it long enough, I can still feel a little bit. Maybe not in everything, because again, I've really, really been disciplined to the idea that thinking that things are mistakes is counterproductive. It's not helpful. Looking at them as lessons makes more sense to me. But again, we're talking about shame, and I really like what we hit upon on just how it lingers, how it's the last thing to go. It's hard. I love your suggestion to name it, to bring it forward, get it out in the light, speak to it, try to make it as comfortable as you have it, not trying to fix it or judge it, but just be there with it. I think that's very important, and I think it will help develop the space so you can deal with not just whatever that event was, but more importantly, just the way you feel about it. The idea that because I did this, I'm a bad person, or I'm dumb, or I'm not attractive, or I'm poor, whatever, they really all just kind of funnel into, I'm not enough, I'm not complete, I'm not good. So I think that's great advice. I know when Robert was talking about it, he mentioned that, mindfulness and self-awareness, is important because that awareness allows you to not just, as you said, not let it sit in silence, but to see it, to recognize it, to pull it forward, if you will, back out of the past and kind of sit with it in the present moment. I think meditation as a practice is so important because it allows for that space to sit in these moments. And I just think that, again, if you just want to practice to be healthier, that's fine. I think the longer you practice, though, everything eventually will come up, but you have the space and the skills to deal with it. So, is shame something that pops up for you quite a bit when you practice, or is it more something that because you practice, you're more aware of it, day to day, minute to minute?
Well, I liked how you talked about it becoming healthy, because that is such a good goal in the sense of developing, a meditation practice or that awareness. I would say that while I'm not completely cured of shame, unfortunately, it doesn't pop up as much for me. There's myriad of other things, jealousy, frustration. We could probably talk about in another podcast.
Those are future episodes, Jordan.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
why you're so
Spoiler
valuable.
alert. Yeah.
Mhm.
I have to thank my ego for that, for just drawing up all of these wonderful topics. But so I started to separate myself from the action. I really told myself I'm not what I did and I'm not what happened to me. And those were pivotal in the sense of what I feel shame about. You're really holding yourself accountable with compassion when you're meditating, and that alone starts to eradicate and kind of pick at those negative feelings. I would Robert was talking about awareness, and so we can get even a little deeper on the subject, especially when we're talking about kind of analyzing, what we're actually experiencing when we're going through shame. And that's challenging that inner critic. Like, whose voice is this really? And do I actually even believe it?
You know, yeah, and I think that leads to, the value of forgiveness for yourself. As you stated, you're not your actions. You're certainly not your thoughts. You're not your past, because that's in the past, and we're trying to live in the moment. But I think it's so important when we're talking about shameful or regretful situations is, to utilizing your practice, you can kind of lean into those stories and you can transform them into these learning opportunities. It also gives you a chance to really work with the idea and the process of loving yourself, because the pain is inside, and you're causing it. It's not like a cut on your finger or something. So if you're causing it, you can also heal it. And so I think, you just have to understand that no matter what that critic inside your head is saying, at the end of the day, in this life, this is you. And the better you know that true Buddha nature, that true spirit, the more you can love it, the more you need to love it. And the better you can love yourself, the better you can love others. So again, practice gives you that space. And shame is such a valuable tool when you flip it around like that and realize I got to love myself through that. I've got to understand that I'm not that person anymore, and that it's not helping me or anyone around me to feel shame. I think at some point, thousands of years ago in our development as people, someone decided that shame was a good tool to hang on to help you survive, much like everything else with your ego. But it's too simple. If you start tearing it apart, you realize that the stress it causes and the pain it causes and the way it causes you to deal with others, it's just unhelpful. It's unhealthy, and it not only hurts you, it hurts them. So that's why we go back to, if you can love yourself, you'll love others better as well. Plus,
Right.
no one's ever going to love you as well, or can love you as well as you can love yourself. But that's part of this journey. You have to accept that and really try to work with it and build on it.
Absolutely. I also wanted to touch too, and sorry for just jumping. I'm so excited to keep talking to you. I just talk over you. But I also wanted to touch that a lot of our background isn't in, obviously, Buddhism. So it's rooted in, and I'm not throwing Christianity under the bus here whatsoever, because there's, definitely parts of the Bible and Christianity that I love, and I love to use it metaphorically a lot. However, I think shame was driven a lot into our culture from, the church. So you have to evaluate the origin of our thoughts. And that was kind of a philosophical beginning when I started to discover who I was. And a lot of the things that I thought of myself weren't even real. And they stemmed from age-old impressions from, dictatorship from the church or government, or, hell, even where I was raised in my environment. So you have to evaluate, is the shame actually even real, or did you kind of receive it like an unwanted gift?
Right, right. Which this is we're going to continue this shift on our topic a little bit, but it makes me wonder how much of shame and guilt, even though it's a taught or developed emotion for us, how much of it we just got handed to because of what our family was and who they were. And that doesn't mean, I think that happens to everybody. It's not it's not a bad reflection on how you grew up. I had great parents, I had a great family. I love them to death. It's not that, but because that's how they were brought up, and they didn't know to be aware of that. They didn't know, well, what if we dealt with it differently? It just became something, of how we did things. And so you see it across, all family units. And if you didn't have a family, you probably inherited even more problems, because at least the family, in theory, loves you and tries to raise you as best they can. So I think this is one of those times where Western Buddhism struggles compared to our brethren in the East, because they do have a hierarchy and the infrastructure set up. So there was, at least in some instances, these families that had tried to deal with it, as opposed to just, you hand it down and every generation it gets a little bigger and a little heavier. So that's why I love practicing and what we're talking about, because it also makes me feel like I'm at least taking responsibility for my stuff, and maybe I'm not handing down as big a mess to my children, for example. Now, we don't know that for sure. It's probably quite a bit bigger, but at least that's how I feel about it. I think it's also important right here, this kind of dovetails in how important it is that no matter what you've been through and what you've done or what has been done to you, that you can practice forgiveness. And again, it starts internally. You start by forgiving yourself, and then it becomes much easier and much more rewarding to forgive others. But I think forgiving is kind of the key if you really want to have less shame. Maybe it's the quickest way to diminish some of that feeling. I don't know that it's the end all be all answer, but I do think it does put it in perspective. And I think vocalizing that, hey, I used to pick drinking over spending time with my family, for example. You know what? I'm going to forgive myself for that. That's who I was then. I've made a choice. I've changed, whatever that choice was. But just vocalizing it, having it out front can help move that along and makes the whole process real. So, forgiveness is something that's obviously near and dear to both of us. How do you incorporate it when we talk about shame?
So seeing yourself with compassion, true compassion, can heal years of hidden shame or shame. And I have a mantra that I am human and I am learning and I am still worthy of love. And you can say that again and again and again until it starts to take hold, because that's the truth. I mean, I don't always recognize myself in my reactions to things. I can be frustrated easily some days. I can, snap at the people I love sometimes. I can be late. That's a big one. Oh, I hate that one. That one gives me tons of shame. It's a plethora of all these I can choose from. But I will say confidently, I still love myself, and and not even in an arrogant way, but I know that, again, I'm learning. I can't be perfect. You can't just grasp control on life and then just decide how you're going to be for the rest of it, and then just be consistently disappointed when you don't reach this bar that you've imaginarily set for yourself. So yes, giving yourself grace. Goodness. I mean, I love Ram Dass. He talks about we're all just walking each other home. And that's like a very classic kind of statement from him, but it's true. I mean, talk it out. Talk to Victor, Robert, meet with your Sangha. I know we talked about the importance of Sangha before. And, I like to stress, like, everybody's going through it. We're not unique by any means. I mean, I love to think I'm so unique, but it's really not the case at the end of the day. So those are a couple little tips.
Now, the power of the Sangha for me, and I think for you, I'm going to go speak for all of us right here, is that we've embraced the idea of let's take these experiences, good, bad, difficult, tragic, happy, and let's understand that they're really all the same size and they're really just things to learn from. And so once you do that, one, it starts to transform the person going through that. Because now, even though we've been talking about shame, it's not a cloud around you as much as maybe now it's a stream or it's something, it's a lesson and you're dealing with it. You get it out, you look at it and forgive yourself, maybe it gets smaller. And as you practice and as we support each other, that environment to deal with those things and to learn from them increases. And it allows you, what we're really doing, I said this before, is it's addition by subtraction, which, by the way, I told you there'd be no math, but there's going to be a little bit. It's addition by subtraction in that we're really processing, we're really dealing with those things. And as they are dealt with, then they go from being these heavy stones that we carry around to just being life lessons that we learned, and then they start to fade away. And so, Robert mentioned that if you apply mindfulness and reflection in your daily life, that you can transform these feelings of shame into compassion and understanding, opening your heart and your mind to greater peace and resilience, which was said beautifully. For me, that just means, you practice. You practice acceptance, you practice awareness, you utilize loving yourself and forgiving yourself. You build wisdom through that. It just happens naturally. You get less suffering, and because you have less suffering, you have more happiness. It's just that equation. So it's just a choice, but again, for me, the practice is so important because it gives you that place and that space and those abilities to deal with it.
I love that metaphor where you appear as a noble warrior and you go to the cave to slay the dragon because you don't want to wait for the dragon to fly into town and burn it all down, right? Into the village. And that's exactly what, I picture when I'm eradicating these parts of myself that don't fit into the narrative in my story anymore, that I don't want to resonate with anymore. So it can be very freeing to sit with yourself in meditation, like we've urged or, talked about, which I'll probably do after this conversation, to be honest, because I don't want to appear in any way that, I'm a shameless person. And I have a few shameless jokes, though, don't get me wrong, and I'm going to definitely share one at the end of this. But
I look forward to that. So before we get to the mighty summary of this whole offering, I think it's interesting also that when you decide to deal with shame, you change the narrative. You go from being the victim of whatever happened and whatever caused the shame to instead being the observer. And maybe you prefer, I think I do, you're the warrior, like you said, you're going to go to the cave, you're going to seek out the dragon, as opposed to waiting and having it show up in bad times or not dealing with it at all. So I think that's really well said. And again, I think it speaks to what practice can do for you, whether you're a Buddhist or not, or whether you go to a Sangha or not, just having a practice and having that space. So, it was well said. And like I said, let's not be a victim. Let's go do what we can.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you might be a victim of my terrible joke now. Whit, what do sweet potatoes wear to bed?
Jordan, I don't know. What do sweet potatoes wear to bed?
Drum roll. They wear yammies.
Somehow that joke gets better the more I hear it, And that's pretty high praise.
I apologize for telling you twice.
That's okay. I think we all know where the blame rests on that one. So, Jordan, I want to thank you for co-hosting episode 5 of Home on the Range with me today. It has been a pleasure as always. I want to thank the audience for listening to this episode. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them on our Spotify page. You can also go to the TBC Discord channel and leave a comment there. If you want, you can also email us at omontherange.podcast@gmail.com. You can also use that email address if you would like access to the TBC Discord channel if you don't have it at this point. Again, that is omontherange.podcast@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening. My name is Whit, and I am signing off, wishing you happy trails. Thank you to Mr. Tim Behrens for producing this episode, and thank you to Brad Athey for providing the music. And thank you to our listeners for joining us on this journey as we discuss meditation and Western Buddhism and celebrate the path to a happier and healthier life. Less suffering and more joy are available to all people. While we cannot control what happens to us, we can control how we react. It just takes practice. Until next time, stay grounded and find peace in the simple, practical solutions. This is Om on the Range, wishing you happy trails.